Righto, if we can just come to some attention. Welcome to this meeting of the Waitaki District Council Roading Subcommittee. Inaugural, but we have informally chatted in the past, but we didn't make any decisions. I do have an apology from Councillor Percival. I think all other members of the subcommittee are here. Do we have any declarations of interest? Well, I'll move and Councillor McCain will second that apology. All those in favour, please say aye. And welcome to Councillor Linwood online. Lovely Queen's wave there, thank you. Any declarations of interest? And I also will outline, of course, the standard procedure here is that the members of the subcommittee are full participants in this discussion. Other councillors are most welcome to participate in the meeting, but if there is any voting required, they do not have voting rights. So we move on to the decision reports within the agenda, and obviously there is a request under 3.1 to remove or some unformed roading at McRae's flat. So Mr. Rendell, are you going to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have received a request to stop a portion of Golden Bar Road as well as an unnamed road off Golden Bar Road, both being in the McRae's flat area. Officers don't believe that there is a need for this unformed road anymore. It's currently mostly utilised as mining space, frankly. And as such, officers are of the view that it can be stopped and disposed of. Any costs associated with the stopping of the road would of course be borne by the adjoining landowner or the purchaser of the property. And the sale price would be no less than the market value as assessed by a registered valuer. This particular item is coming to the roading subcommittee, as the roading subcommittee has delegations for the hearing of objections to any road stopping procedure, and as such we inferred that the decision would probably best come to you to then recommend it to council. Happy to take any particular questions on the report, but otherwise hand over.
Councillor Hopkins, before I take your question, I am personally familiar with this said road, Mr. Rendell. In fact, I travelled it prior to Oceana Gold dumping huge amounts of waste rock on top of it, so I do have an intimate knowledge of the area. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just one very quick question. Obviously, there's a reference to the fact that all the costs associated will be borne by the landowner. But on the on page 8 of the agenda, we're told that the road terminates in the adjoining landowner's property. So my question really is, is that adjoining landowner a party to the process, and or can that adjoining landowner say, no, I'm not happy about this?
Yes, correct. So the adjoining landowner is part of the process. When we're actually saying adjoining landowner, we're talking about the person who's adjoining where the road is, as in it being our property. So that's the person who will be the willing buyer of the road.
The properties are all owned by the same landowner, even though they're different properties. Councillor McCain.
I'd just like to say that we should go with option 1. It's pretty simple, cut and dry, and let's get on with it.
So are you moving?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So we have moved Councillor McCain, seconded.
Can we just check that he's moving the officer recommendations without amendment, please, instead of option 1?
Option 1.
No, recommendations on page 6.
He got to move the officer recommendations rather than the options. Yes.
All right, remove recommendations 1 to 4.
And Councillor Cowles, you're happy to second that? All right, there's no further discussion on that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Can you just give us a thumbs up, councillor Linwood, so that we know? Thank you.
Do you want me to use my thumb or say aye because it comes through a bit delayed?
You can just use your thumb rather than your electronic one. Will be fine. Thank you. I declare that has been passed. Yes. Yes, it has been unanimously. No, just passed will be fine. Thank you, Madam GA. All right, we move on to item 3.2, which is roading policies, various in tranche 2. And I'll invite whoever wishes to speak.
3.1 for a brief second.
Yes, you may.
So look, I think this is great that we've identified something that is useless to the council but useful to the landowner, and if we can find anything else along those lines, please pursue it, and we can tidy a whole lot of stuff up all at once.
We do note and endorse that sentiment. Mr. Randell, did you?
Yeah, thank you. Just as I suppose, a commentary with respect to that, the road stopping process does generally meet a willing buyer, willing seller type of situation. So we don't tend to actively go and look for land we're able to stop and then hand over. It's more a situation that occurs when someone approaches us. Obviously, there is a cost to undertaking a stopping process, and many people enjoy the use of the land in some respects without having to go through that process. So I suppose we could encourage people to purchase the land through potentially not allowing the access to the unnamed parcels of road or unformed legal road. But yes, concur with the sentiments. It's just not something that we actively seek. It's something that generally comes from members of the public seeking it from councilmen.
Thank you for that explanation. All right, we go back to 3.2. Ms. Tapper, are you speaking to that?
I'll press the wrong button. Kia ora. So item 3.2, roading subcommittee, roading policies, tranche 2. So we've in 2020 approved a whole lot of policies, which were tranche 1. It was 12 of them. We're presenting here, I've said 16, but some of them have been rolled together. Put it all in one attachment so that you could see the full list of policies from tranche 1, 2 and 3, and just left the headers in for the ones we've already approved, that you have already approved, and then put the detail of the proposed policies for tranche 2 for approval within that appendix as well. I've left one of them, which is number 108, all in italics, because it was proposed as part of tranche 2. However, a lot of the detail in it, the roading team members aren't particularly in favour of, and we think that there's a few things there that could open us up to some challenges. It has been presented to us from a consultant based on I think it was Central Otago District Council policies, which got quite different layout and climate and therefore different use in a lot of their roadside trees. So I recommend that one be deferred to tranche 3. But all of the others that are there in detail, I hope they meet your requirements and that you'd be happy to endorse them to then, well, not endorse, to recommend them to full council for approval. Happy to answer any specific questions.
Anyone got any questions on the proposal? Oh, well, go for it.
The first thing, Tricia, alfresco dining, is that really part of roading? Is that not, could we actually move it sideways and say those are giving permits to have a restaurant, that if they wanted to bid on the pavement, then so it just frees your whole business up. That was just one question that came to mind.
For our fresco dining, we're trying to make sure that policies are consistent across council. So we've started that off by language. And whilst it is managed in a lot of ways as part of compliance and regulatory for dining premises, it's still an activity that occurs within the road reserve, and thus we'd want some oversight or commentary within the roading policy, but it definitely can be removed. So policy doesn't necessarily mean implementation either. So it doesn't mean that all of these things will have to be managed by roading, and within the transformation there is no roading anyway, so it'll be managed across council as a whole team approach.
Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I also noticed, and I've silly me, I forgot to write down the page number, but it's 201 and talks about road width. Is that from the centre line? Are we using on old scales, or what is that actual road width? And where I'm coming from that is a lot of farmers now are bringing their fences out to within 1 or 2 metres of the edge of the road, because it's easier for them to maintain, look after the council culverts as such, to get them run through and also keep the noxious plants under control.
Sorry, did you say under policy 201? Which,
Yes.
yeah, so
Right.
yeah, rural carriageway width standards policy. So that's part of tranche 3. So I don't actually have the detail within this document on what we're proposing, but in terms of the width, saying carriageway is the part that you drive the vehicles on, or that's traversable. So it's saying, for example, if we've got a road reserve legally that's 20 metres wide, when we maintain a road, should it be, say, for example, at least 5.5 metres, depending on the full length of it, and passing bays, or whether rather than trying to maintain every road to a minimum of 7 metres wide. That's the kind of detail that we cover.
Right, I suppose where I'm coming from, I was brought up this half chain and chain road from the centre line, and it was for driving stock down there and everything else, but now it's actually a nuisance for the maintenance of those roads, because you're actually having to maintain noxious weeds and culverts that go out and have got nowhere to drain to, I suppose.
So the legal width is, I would recommend that we don't try and change any of that, because it's a property boundary and requires a lot of survey, etc. But if we're allowed, quite often we will allow people to fence parts of the road reserve off and make it easier to maintain via stock grazing and etc., rather than having mechanical means of weed control.
Councillor Hopkins?
Good question. Just starting.
Can we have your microphone on, please?
Sorry, I have a few questions. Just starting with the page I'm at, page 55, stop crossings. I'm wondering why we have said a maximum of 1 stop crossing per event per month is permitted per property. In my experience with farms, even the one on Bushy Beach Road, is that those crossings happen more regularly than that. So what is the basis of having a policy that says a maximum of 1 a month is permitted, please? That's question number 1.
May I answer them one at a time?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for that one, that's suggesting that you don't need to come to us at all if you're only doing them on the odd occasion. Whereas if you want to use it regularly, then come to us, talk to us, and then we'll issue a permit. So essentially it's like a permitted activity, saying if you're only going to do it once a month, roughly, or average, just
Sorry.
go for it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I thought by permitted you meant that was all you would allow, but I'm seeing what you're saying. So in other words, if you're doing 1 a month, that's fine. You don't have to ask permission from anyone, but if you do, okay. Now looking at the grazing one on page 53, again, I'm curious, for the purposes of, this is temporary grazing may only be undertaken on roadsides of low volume roads, etc. For the purpose of this policy, temporary shall mean a maximum of 28 days in any 3 months period. And again, I'm just wondering, why have we settled on that date or that number of days?
So for that one, temporary, if we just put temporary without any days, then there'll be always a question of what does that mean? Similar to for freedom camping, you've got to have a maximum number. Then in terms of how much do we enforce the number, not particularly much, but the reason why we want to say that it's temporary is that if we want to perform vegetation control, drainage work, something like that, then we have to, that the customer needs to understand that they've got the expectation that they would not always have their stock on the side of the road, and therefore that they shouldn't have a permanent fence, and that there's something that can be easily moved, and that they could even have a temporary fence out there, say the whole time of the 3 months, but we wouldn't expect to have stock on the side of the road for 3 months, which could become also a welfare issue for the stock.
Okay. Then we've got policy 308, levelling and cultivation of roadsides. Thank you for the answer, by the way. With the levelling, you've got there a general thing, 30861. For the purpose of this policy, a rural area is deemed to be along any road where the speed limit is greater than 70 kilometres an hour. Now, I know that there'll be some recent changes where some of those 70 and 80k roads have been dialed back to 60. So I'm just wondering, is it wise to be quite so specific and say only roads above 70 are affected by this, or would it be better to have something a bit looser or more generic?
That's really good spotting, Jim. And good point in terms of recent changes. It's used as a general description of rural in terms of you could be in a rural area, but if it's deemed to have sufficient density that there's a lot of houses that they would have a reduced speed limit, because most of them would be 100 k's, then chances are you wouldn't be wanting to run a tractor down it and plant potatoes on the roadside. But it doesn't prevent people from still being able to do it. It's just saying, as a general guide, this is what we'll call rural, but it's not exclusive. So if people in Hampden in an urban area, which is say 60 k's an hour, want to plant potatoes and pumpkins on the roadside, they can still apply to do so.
Thank you. Just a couple more, if I may. Temporary storage. This is page 49 of the subcommittee's report. This duration of storage on rural roads. Material may be stored on rural roads, low volume, for a period of up to 128 days without council consent. I mean, again, it's just an old number. Why 128 days?
I imagine that's approximately the length of the time that you'd cut your baleage to when you've finished feeding it out. No? Okay. Please correct me, Mr. Cone.
Yeah, so most of that stuff is made in late October right through to the start of December and doesn't start getting fed till early June or July. So that's 6 months, really.
It's probably an accepted number as far as the farmers can count up to.
Oh, that's a bit low. Yeah. But we can't count.
It actually equates to the number of finger and toes that people in Corridor have to get to that number.
Well, okay, the big ticket questions I have, the two policies that give me the most concern and which I cannot support at the moment are seal extensions and dust management. Are we satisfied that these policies actually reflect and capture the interests of our residents and ratepayers rather than effectively focus on our cost concerns? And would it be possible to reallocate some of the budget? I note, for instance, Josh's subsequent report, we've got $2.something million worth of reseals. Could it be possible, if we actually looked internally at what we do and where our priorities are, that we could actually place more emphasis on the benefit of residents and ratepayers in terms of both of those policies, rather than effectively saying in each instance you're on your own. If you want it, you pay for it in whole, and you're not likely to get our agreement to do it anyway.
I think the problem we have is that some rural roads essentially are no longer rural roads because of the amount of subdivision and the number of houses that have been built on them subsequent to the one or two people that lived up each road. So the bottom line is that if someone all of a sudden wants to say that dust is an issue because of the number of vehicles travelling on that road, we need to revisit the reasons why, because initially everything was fine. The last informal discussion we had about products that are available is that we may be able to coordinate the use of those products with people if they wish to do it. But we're not actually going to pay for it.
Well, see,
Hang on, no, I'll just let Ms. Tapper reply to that.
From the way I've tried to word these policies is they're not exclusive from council deciding that they want to invest non-subsidised money into an upgrade, which can be part of any form of program that you want to support. The policy is in terms of requests that don't fit the subsidised package. So we don't have subsidy. We cannot use the NZTA approved dollars for these activities. So they have to be, so we can't reallocate out of the NZTA approved money. You can reallocate within your local rate. So if a ward fund or if a separate, a seal extension fund was set up, that can be still run alongside this policy that says, if you want to do these kind of things, here's how we'll help you. But that doesn't exclude people from still writing submissions to the annual plan and still having a project for the likes of Tutu Hill Road or District Road, etc.
Okay. I suppose, look, there was one other one, but roadside trees, that I'll come to in a moment if I may, but just staying with those two for a moment. Why, for the sake of argument, even if you assume that the policy only applies to subsidised assisted road extensions, why have we said that you have to have a minimum of 200 metres to even be considered for seal extension? Certainly, for an example like District Road, that 200 metres wouldn't necessarily be essential. Why aren't we including in the policy an intention to look at alternative solutions like orca sealing and things like that? And with regard to the dust one, is it ethical to say if you want to have dust suppression, you pay for it? That's like saying the factory is polluting the atmosphere, the workers have to buy their own gas masks. And that seems to me to be wrong in principle. If there is a problem with dust, surely we should actually accept, as the owner of the infrastructure that's causing the problem, that we have a role in mitigating it and funding its mitigation.
Councillor McCain?
Mr. Hopkins has beat me to the point, but I'm quite hot under the collar about this dust suppression stuff. And a whole lot of things that we haven't taken into consideration. One is the material we're using is a very soft, very dusty substance, which is no longer. They used to put a coarse-based gravel when they found out there was little bits of clay in it. They didn't like it, so they've gone to crushing stuff out of the rivers now, which is a very soft material, sedimentary material. That's the first stop. Secondly, a lot of those houses have been there since the 1950s and 60s, sitting there, and I can take you to one right now where the people living in that house have had to buy a dryer because they cannot leave their clothes out to dry. And they do have young children with health and safety issues with the blame the dust, whether it is or not, I don't know. But the main problem is that road is used now as a through between the two gullies. So with the advent of dairying, there's now, instead of one movement a week, there's one movement every hour and a half as those vehicles come through. And the prevailing winds are southwest, northwest. So that dust they cannot open their windows. And I know that's only one part of the system, but if you go across the road with Nancy's Pass, you'll find all those properties in through there have a stretch of 100 or 150 metres of seal, it's chip seal, it's just put in there. There's no major preparation, but it stops that dust suppression. And I think for the amount of rates some of these guys pay, it's only fair that we actually should solve that problem for them.
That sounds perfectly logical, but I suggest it's also illogical in that it is not our fault that more traffic, or not council's fault that more traffic are on the road. Microphone.
No, I'd agree with that. It's not our fault, but that's the way it's gone. And there's the materials we're using, I would argue, are probably more prone to for dust than the ones we have been using.
Mr. Palmley, I see you've got an itch.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the bit about, paying rates. I mean, I don't deny that these people pay a lot of rates, but currently the rates don't cover the sealing of that road. And so we're going to live in the realms of reality that if you're going to start sealing more roads, it's going to be paid for. It's not just the cost of sealing, it's then the additional maintenance cost that incurs. So if you're going to do that, you're going to have to be charging ratepayers more for that because they're not currently paying for it. If they were paying for it, their rates would be more than what they are at the moment. Or the alternative is that you need to look at what services you don't provide anything being cut to be able to do that within the existing rating bands.
Yes, I take that on board too, but we're only talking about a short piece, probably the length of this building, the first instance. Secondly, I know it's frowned upon now, but they used to have oil on the road to suppress that dust, but now that's not at all allowed, but it still does happen.
And the one example you've just given is one short piece, but there'll be lots of people putting their same hands up going, why are we, we want the same. And then it becomes, how do you prioritise and how do you afford and deliver that amount of work? So the guidance I got from the briefing was that we can't afford it. So put in a policy that supports our financial position, which is what I've done. If you don't want to approve it, not a problem. No skin off my nose. Jumping back to in terms of material, there's lots of different material sources that we're using for mettling. We've had one recently that we're very unimpressed with, which is being addressed. But a lot of the time we're trying to work with what's on the road, what is needed to blend with what's on the road to provide a good usable surface. So we will sometimes use different types of material with different material properties based on the blends and what we're expecting the climate to be within the next few months. And then there was another aspect that I was going to talk about, which I've
Mr. Rendell.
Sorry, just to provide some further commentary from Mr. Tapper. I think as Councillor Hopkins has alluded to, perhaps we ought to be considering effects on general ratepayers as well as not just our fiscal environment, but there is the reality that at the moment we're in a constrained fiscal environment. We applied for funding for co-funding from NZTA Waka Kotahi to be able to maintain our network within its current condition, and we weren't successfully achieving enough to maintain the current service level, which means there will be some decline in service. We can talk about different materials being used, but the reality is that those materials are the ones that are available and the ones that are most cost effective. I mean, sure, we can talk about the need to seal roads and whatever else to prevent dust from occurring, but they're the materials that are available. We know that there's material shortages within the road network, and we try to manage our budgets as best we can to try to get the best possible outcome that we possibly can. In support of Mrs. Tapper's comments, if this is a matter that's contentious, which we didn't believe it would be, happy to reconsider this policy at a later time when we've had some more further discussion about it.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, my view is that seal extensions and dust suppression are the two hot button issues year after year after year. Those are the two things that members of the community come to us about and ask us to consider. So all I'm saying is I would like the policies to be my own personal view, and it may not be the view of others, so that's fine. But I just think that the policy should be more responsive to the community, and if that means adjusting our internal priorities, it's something that I would like to see us look at. But but I think you're right, Josh, in the end, that's up to us in the future. If I may just ask a couple more questions.
I will just point out that we're 5 minutes away from having to finish, and there's still 2 more items on the agenda, so please be quick.
Well, yes, look, the roadside trees, that's policy.
108, which I'm recommending be.
Oh, that's right, you are too. So we parked that one. And the only other comment I'd make is I think you've got to reference one of the policies that must have been prepared a wee while ago, which only refers to Waka Kotahi. And I noticed that Josh's subsequent report says NZTA Waka Kotahi. And I think the policy would need to be changed to reflect the new title.
And look, I thank you for parking 108 because the corridor ward is planted, the whole sides of the roads are planted by an ex-chairman of the county council. They planted the whole damn lot. So that was one thing to think about. Secondly, just a definition of what is an authorised roading contractor.
So we have a list available on our website. So when people want to be able to work within the road corridor, not necessarily working for council, they fill out a form and they provide us with copies of their site-wise certificates, any insurances like public liabilities, that sort of thing. They give us a bit of information about what kind of work they want to be able to do and what some of their policies and procedures are. They basically have a vetting process with us. Then they can become what the term is, but they have a 6-month probationary period where they can be an authorised contractor. So essentially it's almost like being endorsed by council. So when people phone up and go, hey, who can we use? We say, here's a list on our website where we're not giving any favoritism, but we are aware that those people will follow our processes or are at least aware of our processes for things like traffic management, road corridor access requests, things like that. So if they perform well within that probationary period, then they get to stay on there basically indefinitely. But if we have multiple complaints, then we talk to them about that and then they can be removed. So that's what that is. And I've remembered the 200 metres was about dust can easily travel over 80 metres. So if wind blows in more than one direction, then you would need probably at least 160 metres. And then in terms of the life of the seal and the ability to go, if it's assuming it's going to be gravel either side of it, chances are, and then we want to have a transition length of at least 30 metres either side to go from 3% to 5% at least. And so that was where we got the 200 metres. But obviously if someone says, look, I really, 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 really only need 150, then we'd probably be open to that.
All right, well, just to bring the discussion to an end, we have a recommendation that the subcommittee recommends to council the approval of the tranche 2 roading policies listed below, A through P, some of which we've discussed and had explanations, and 2, delegates to the chief executive the ability to change role titles of policy owners to the officer who will be responsible for them once the transformation organisational redesign process has been completed. I'm happy to move that recommendation from the chair. Madam Chair.
I note that through that discussion, somebody said you are parking 108. So is that to be excluded from this offer? So D is coming out, and there was some discussion by one particular member about 106, but is that included or not? If you could just clarify that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council. All right, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cowles. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. We move on to the next item. Mr. Rendell, you're going to tell us all about sealing.
Yes, yeah, thank you. We're just catching up. This is a memorandum report essentially for the roading subcommittee's information. There's a certain number of roads that we need to undertake resealing on for a variety of reasons this sealing season. Just notifying of which roads those are. Yeah. which sections of road those are, as well as what the particular treatment is. You'll see in there I've submitted what is essentially a glossary, so there's a little bit more of an understanding about the reasons why we use different types of seals at different times. Happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
I presume that this is, some of these roads are at the 30-year timeframe or whatever, where if we don't renew them or top dress them, so to speak, deterioration will be even more. Is that correct? Like, just look, for example, I'm looking Fleming Road in Palmerston, you know, it's a low volume road, but it's been previously sealed. Therefore, we need to maintain that asset.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a need to ensure that waterproofing is maintained.
And I can confirm that all of these sites have been visited via actual walkover as well as the AI video, and they've had all their pre-reseal repair faults marked out, and most of those repairs are even already complete because our resealing contractor is actually expecting to be in the district to start sealing next week.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, just one very quick question. Will the seal extension, will the seal renewals be consistent over a defined length of road? Or, and I hope not, will you sanction sort of patchwork reseals a la what's happened on Tyne Street in Humber, about which I have expressed disappointment in the past?
The patchwork were the pre-reseal repairs, and so then this is the seal over a section. So in the landscape pages, it says the start and the end. So they are the meters from the start of the road. So they're called route positions, RPs. So for example, number 1, Palmerston Thomas Street is from 45 metres to 298 metres. Oh. So it's the full width. Yeah. So whereas previously they were the patch repairs before the season coat. If we did them quickly, you end up with delamination. So they're supposed to be done the season before if possible.
Councillor McCain?
I see poor old corridor was only getting 4 of their roads done, but never mind, we'll get some more done next time. But the question I have, Eastern Road, I thought that was a gravel road. Which is order number 60, starts 61, 2, 3, and 4.
The sections that are noted there are all really short sections. Chances are those are traction seals on a gravel road. So if we don't maintain the existing short sections of seal there, they could even be intersections with side roads. So I'm not particularly familiar with it, but so we've got 4 short little sections on that road where if we don't maintain it, it'll fall apart.
All right, so we will, oh, you got one more, right? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, and just to thank you for this glossary of the terms, the seal, that's very informative. So I'm assuming if we get back to the airport this morning, the bottom one we're talking about for the airport is the slurry seal at the bottom. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, yeah, correct. We'll be looking at either undertaking a slurry seal or potentially a cape seal. Yes.
I will point out, Councillor, this is the rating subcommittee and not the airport. You slipped that one past us. All right. That's fine. We do note and receive that information. And thank you, Mr. Rendell. We move on to 4.2. Councillor McCone, Councillor Cowles, all those in favour? Aye. We move on to 4.2, which is an issue that I wanted to raise with the committee around our level of delegations that this committee is charged with. Basically, I would like to engender a conversation as to whether they are what we want, whether they don't reach far enough, or whether they are overreaching into the operational space. We haven't got time to discuss it today, but I wanted the issue raised today with the intention of us having a discussion going forward around those delegations.
If I may, I'm not sure whether the question is to you or Mr. Palmley, or maybe even to Gary. Presumably, if the subcommittee wished to amend its delegations, it would have to ask the council to endorse that and move accordingly. Would that be correct, Mr. Chair?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll answer that. And yes, that is correct. All delegations would need to go through council for approval. Thank you.
Is there anyone want to come? Councillor McCann?
No, look, I'd just like to comment on it, and I think it's well worth pursuing.
Do you have any particular areas? Do you have any particular areas, Mr. Chair, that you'd like us to think about in advance of the conversation you're proposing to have?
No, I don't really want to prejudice that conversation. I simply want to raise the topic so that we can have an open-ended conversation. And I think it's that, as I say, it's a particularly pertinent time with the transformation process and the reorganisation of how roading is going to function within council, that we need to get a clear understanding of how to maximise the benefit of this subcommittee. So I will, in discussion with the governance advisor, try and organise a time for us to workshop that issue going forward, so that we can make a recommendation if there are any changes required to council. And at 4:07 PM, I declare the meeting closed.
Yes, thank you.